Hey, welcome back. Okay, this is going to be another part two, and we're going to continue on how Marcos stole from the country. So, even with the news to boost their investments after the Laurel and Langley agreement ended, the International Chambers of Commerce in Japan, America, the Philippines, Australia, Europe released reports that doing business in the Philippines was extremely difficult, because the red tape, the corruption, the poor internal infrastructure. I mean, it's literally, in order for you to do something, you had to pay a bribe to somebody. And when I got married in 1989 in Parañaque, I was told flat out, you have to wait 10 days. And the lady was emphatic, you can't get married. I was telling, I have to go back to Japan in 6 days. And the lady goes, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you. Well, her boss came over and said, wait a minute, you're American, right? I said, yeah. He goes, you don't have to wait 10 days. And she was like, what? He pulled her to the side, then called my ex-wife over. Before then, it was before we got married. And he came back and says, do you want to get married right now, or do you want to get married? When do you want to get married? I said, I will be married in the morning because I have to go home and take a shower, clean up, because back then there was a lot of smog and diesel fluid fumes in Manila, so you would actually literally have dirt marks all over your body when you came back. So I was married the next day, even though I was going to supposed to had to wait 10 days. They backdated it, and I got married the next day for, I think it was $20 maybe, $25. I think that's probably what it was. So they said there was a lot of corruption. And this was not what the Chamber of Commerce around the world were saying prior to the Laurel-Langley Agreement being suspended. So in 1980, the Marcos family purchased the Webster Hotel in New York City for $1.5 million. And it was placed in the name of General Romeo Gaetan as a limited partner for his role in arresting Ninoy Aquino when martial law was imposed in the Philippines. Because the insurgency rates in the military now ranks 25%, many certain military officers were overlooked for promotions, and pretty much it was a lot of nepotism, and certain people were promoted and certain people weren't. And one thing they did in the Philippines back in the 1970s, 1980s, is the military members only received about $50 a month in pay, plus they received a bag of rice. That was the only thing they got. One bag of rice and $50 per month. So not only was the Philippine National Bank losing money due to the Marcos family, General Ver, the chief of staff, used the P&E funds to finance intelligence operations in the Philippines at a cost of 72.1 billion pesos, or $3.1 billion. The DBP Development Bank of the Philippines lost $4 billion, and Philippine Guarantee Bank lost $300 million, and the NIDC, National Investment Development Bank, lost $140 million because of misappropriation of funds, and these funds were never repaid. Philippine Airlines, like I said, and I think last week's video, Imelda claimed in the 1990s she had part ownerships of it, and they were in debt nearly $700 million. And it was believed that when Marcos left the nation, he left behind over $17.1 billion in losses in debt to the nation. So basically, the Philippines owed $17.1 billion to other nations to pay these bills, which they couldn't. And so after a special review of the banks after the revolution concluded, despite private acknowledgement of losses from the Marcoses and their cronies, no mention of Imelda Ver's name could be seen on any bank records, and therefore didn't justify any criminal actions for those two. It also hinted that no missing money or theft took place, just adjustments and deficiencies to justify their losses and shortages of money. So basically they were saying that there might have been $600 million missing, but nobody knows. It was just poor management at the time. So later that year, the Central Bank of the Philippines had lost so much equity that it reported to the creditors that they could not make their payments. So the national debt payments, like they might owe like $20 million to the United States and they were paying $2 million a year to pay it off. They couldn't make the payments. And this meant that the Philippines was in fact bankrupt. So trying to find how the Philippines became bankrupt so abruptly, the International Monetary Fund sent members into the Philippines to find out the financial status of the country, the banks, and everything to find out why there was no money. So news started around quickly from the assassination of Aquino to another plot by Marcos when it was discovered that a Filipino-American named Jose Cruzal was arrested and arrived in Seattle in a flight from Manila. He was trying to clear customs and tried to hide a plastic bag in the backpack of on the back part of his pants. And Immigration and Customs saw this and they demanded to know what it was that he had. So they took him into a room and they interrogated him. And they finally took the plastic bag out, discovered it was documents relating to a loan statement from Marcos requesting billions of dollars from American businessman Frank Higdon. And Marcos offered to secure the loan from gold from the Central Bank of the Philippines, or Manila. So to add to Marcos' dilemma, the overall economy of the Philippines began to plunge off a cliff. I mean, it was going from bad to worse. Personal incomes of the Philippines had fallen to the worst it's been in 30 years. However, the rich in the Philippines increased by 40%. So what I remember when I was in the Philippines in 1989, there was a commercial for Westinghouse, and they said 250,000 homes in the Philippines of nearly 5 million people, or 5 million homes, had actually had refrigerators and other electronic appliances. And this was all because of the poverty in the Philippines. And this actually helped out the NPA to have a reason to fight against Marcos, because they said there was so much poverty and stuff was going on that they really needed to fight against the system and rid themselves of Marcos. So by 1983, Marcos had accumulated a massive amount of gold. Most of it was in the 70s, and it was at $35 an ounce. But now it's ballooned up to about $900 an ounce. And Marcos needed to launder the gold to hide it through the world. So in order for him to do that, he needed to find people outside of the country that could actually help him launder the gold and sell it without being noticed. So he created contracts with people. And his search led into two real estate brokers from Australia. Their names are Michael O'Brien and John Doyle. And they were in Malaysia in 1983 looking for venture capitalists. Venture capitalism is people that put up money for other businesses to invest in real estate. So basically they were looking for people with money so they could invest in real estate. They sell it, and then they split the profit with both of them. And so they were in Malaysia trying to find these venture capitalists to buy real estate in Australia. And they were met by Andrew Tan Ben Chang, who inquired of them they could serve brokers, help them sell 10,000 metric tons of gold. 10,000 metric tons of gold would be about $1 billion, I believe. Let me find out here. So that's 2,200 pounds times 10, right? Oh, I'm sorry. 10,000 times 16 for the ounces, and then times 900. That was like $316 billion. So that's actually, I mean, that's right. It's 316. Oh, they wanted to know if they could sell 10,000 metric tons of gold. And so when they inquired who was selling this gold and why they were selling the gold, Tan refused to divulge the information to the duo. He only stated the amount of gold being sold could not be sold through normal means and channels. Well, of course not. If you sell them that much gold, some radar is going to come up. And he would need people with influence to help sell the gold in international markets. These two were just real estate agents. They probably had some contacts. So they decided to help him launder the gold. However, they need more information. They formed a company named Peyton, in the meantime, which would sell gold bars on the international market. In 1983, they flew to the Philippines and met Chang and Colonel Fike Manoa. Manoa claimed to be the sole representative of the owner. However, he refused to indulge who the owner was of the gold. So later, when they met a man named Clement, and he secretly whispered that it was Mr. and Mrs. Ferdinand Marcos. And he said that Mrs. Marcos knew of the gold, and it was Mr. Marcos who was selling it. And it was all about the business. So Imelda knew that Marcos was selling the gold and probably took the money, but it was Ferdinand that did all the business transactions. And he offered them through Marcos an offer that they thought they couldn't refuse, and it was a 1-ton statue of a Buddhist with a removable head. The statue weighed 875 pounds, which would have been about a half a metric ton. So about a half a ton. The 875 came from the documents from Hawaii when Rojas sued Ferdinand Marcos. And it came from city of Baguio, from a dig near the Baguio hospital, and was donated willingly to the president by the finder. It wasn't donated willingly. It was donated by a gun to the head. And so the two men actually refused the offer, and fearing the size and description of Buddha may cause too much attention to them. So this would have been in 1983, was it? 1983. 1983. So it was still 5 years later that 10 years later, Marcos still had the Buddha statue. And so O'Brien got nervous and told Clement that he didn't believe that they could have 10,000 metric tons of gold bars in the Philippines. Like I said, that was billions of dollars, $36 billion. And so they said, come to the Philippines, because they didn't believe 10,000. They've been in the Philippines. They've never seen 1 ounce of gold. So they said, if you got 10,000 metric tons, we want to see it. So to prove to the men that they were that much gold, they were blindfolded. Don't tell me why they're blindfolded. And taken to a warehouse in Manila where they witnessed over 1,200 bars of gold. Each bar weighed about 38 pounds. And they were convinced that they were gold. But if you took the 1,200 bars at 38, even at 40 pounds, that would have been 40, 44. So that would have been only like 20 metric tons of gold. And they were convinced that they were as gold, and Marcos did possess the gold and as much gold as they claimed. So the men, through their company, signed 6 contracts with Marcos and to sell gold throughout the world at 1.6 trillion with a T, dollars. Several of the contracts were carried out, and the men were paid at the conclusion of the contracts. So next week I'll even get more into this, and I hope this is information that you need. Thank you very much.